Welcome to Harmonized. I am your host, Gigi Naval, integrative and functional registered dietitian nutritionist, here to help you harmonize your gut and hormone health for improved metabolic health. Welcome to a bonus episode of Harmonized. If you follow me on Instagram, I have said a few times that I am not the biggest fan of food documentaries, nutrition documentaries, health documentaries because of this. Many of them take truth and then they stretch the truth, or they present truth on this aspect, but then they leave out a lot of important pieces of information. So that's my concern with food documentaries, nutrition documentaries, health documentaries. But last week, I was swept away with the excitement of one of my students who shared that there's this really good documentary that was released not too long ago by Netflix. And it is called You Are What You Eat. And when she was telling me, I forgot about my stance on not being such a big fan of these types of documentaries. I was excited. And she said that it's really good. It's really insightful. And she told me a little bit more about it. And so I said, okay, all right. But then I was like, no, I don't have a Netflix account anymore. Yeah, I'm bummed that I can't see it right now or anytime soon, but because I know that it is based off a study, I knew that I can go back to that study and look it up on the internet because these studies are available. It is a study by the Journal of the American Medical Association, and yes, I have it. I have it here. And so I will share my evaluation based on what I'm reading here. So it's not based on the documentary itself because I have not seen it. Hopefully I will be able to see it. Hopefully they will put it on Prime, Amazon, right? On Amazon, on Prime, or what have you, other means. But yeah, I just really tried to minimize subscriptions, right? We're all trying to because those can add up. Okay, so this study is entitled Cardiometabolic Effects of Omnivorous versus Vegan Diets in Identical Twins, a randomized clinical trial. That's one of the good things about this study is that the design is a randomized clinical trial. All right, very good, excellent, way to go. And this is what they wrote. In their abstract, they wrote, the importance increasing evidence suggests that compared with an omnivorous diet, so an omnivorous diet is when you eat both animal products and plant products. A vegan diet is when you eat 100% plants, confers potential cardiovascular benefits from improved diet quality. And they define diet quality, improved diet quality, for example, as higher consumption of vegetables, legumes, fruits, whole grains, nuts, and seeds. So my thing with that is when they say improved diet quality, higher consumption of vegetables, legumes, fruits, whole grains, nuts, and seeds, in my mind, you could still have that eating animal products as well. So that just made me go, oh, interesting. And in their introduction, they said a vegan dietary pattern is typically lower in energy density, but higher in fiber, vitamins, minerals, and phytonutrients compared with other dairy dietary patterns. Okay, let's break this down. True, it is high in fiber, but do we always want way more fiber than what we are recommended? The 25 to 35 grams of fiber per day, because that has its repercussions too. And it says that the vegan dietary pattern is higher in vitamins. But here's the thing, and they do say this in their next sentence, it's deficient in vitamin B12. So that's interesting that they put that, or that they would just say vitamins. But then they also said that the vegan dietary pattern is higher in minerals. This is a perfect example of stating truth, but not telling you everything that needs to be told. What is more important is, are the minerals able to be absorbed by the body? So here's the thing with our farming practices these days, our modern farming practices, they actually are not doing the rotation of crops that are needed on a regular basis on certain designated pieces of land. They're just growing the same thing over and over in where they've been growing those crops. And that is not good for our soil. And they have been using other elements like potassium to help with the plants, but then that is depleting magnesium in the soil. And there are other elements that they use regularly. And because they're not rotating the crops, this is affecting the microorganisms in the soil. Microorganisms like bacteria, fungus, and this is being destroyed because of their farming practices. And we need a variety of the microorganisms to help break down minerals so that these minerals can be absorbed through the roots of plants. But our soil has been deficient or depleted of these minerals. So that's one thing, okay? That's one thing already. Our soil is not producing enough minerals. And then on top of that, even if we didn't have this modern farming practice issue, plants are very rich in phytic acid, and the other name of phytic acid is phytates. So you know that the more fiber plants have, then it also has more phytic acid or phytates. And this phytic acid actually impedes or negatively affects the absorption of iron, calcium, magnesium, zinc, selenium. And so it makes it less bioavailable to the individual. That means the individual isn't able to absorb it and actually use it in their body. So the bioavailability of these minerals that I just mentioned are lower. So this is quite deceiving when they make this statement: a vegan dietary pattern is typically lower in energy density, but higher in minerals. It's not higher in bioavailable minerals. That is found, high bioavailable minerals are found in meat, animal products, because they do not have the phytic acid. So that's really big and huge right there. But yes, it is lower in energy density, higher in fiber. And then it did say in the next sentence, however, sometimes a vegan dietary pattern can limit specific nutrients such as vitamin B12, iron, and calcium. Wait, what? What? Sometimes? It says sometimes a vegan dietary pattern can limit specific nutrients such as vitamin B12. What about all the time? What about if it always limits vitamin B12? And with iron and calcium, what about zinc? What about selenium? Yes, those are so important. Okay, and magnesium as well. And also, in addition to the phytic acid that are found in plants, Things like kale and broccoli, they also have oxalates. And oxalates can impede or affect the absorption of calcium and iron. So that's very interesting. That is not addressed here. And let's see. Yeah, so I wrote myself a note here. That's not all. What about zinc and then iodine? It doesn't talk about iodine. And boy, there's a good percentage of us who are deficient in iodine because you primarily find that in fish and then, of course, algae. But are you really eating a lot of algae on a regular basis? And when this is addressed, that it is deficient in this, might be lower in this, why don't they care about saying what the repercussions are of not having enough of these particular minerals? They say vitamin B12, iron, and calcium, which we know, which I just mentioned, it's more than that. But why didn't they go into that? And that's the issue with some classes. They don't go they don't go into these very important repercussions that should be addressed. And let's see, what else did I want to say? Okay, so the design, I already told you that it is a randomized clinical trial. We got to hand it to them. That is excellent. And so the design, setting, and participants, this single center population-based randomized clinical trial of 22 pairs of twins. It's randomized participants to a vegan or omnivorous diet. So 1 twin per diet. And let's see. So this 8-week open label parallel dietary randomized clinical trial compared the health impact of a vegan diet versus an omnivorous diet in identical twins. So 8 weeks. 8 weeks, that is so short. So much can get depleted the longer you go, but this is just 8 weeks. So that's a concern. So we can't just take data from a short piece of time, okay, or a short span of time and say, oh, look at this has potential to improve this. Okay. And for me, it would have been very interesting to know what these participants were eating prior to starting their actual meal patterns that were assigned to them. It would be nice to know, because did they eat really poorly, really badly before starting this or not? They say they're healthy participants that were enrolled in the study, but you can say that they're healthy, but what were they eating prior? Okay, so the intervention, let's see, twin pairs were randomized. Okay, and I already told you that, so I don't need to read that again. The main outcomes and measures. The primary outcome was difference in low density lipoprotein cholesterol concentration from baseline to the endpoint of 8 weeks. Okay, so they were looking at LDL, but throughout this paper, they don't ever differentiate between large buoyant LDL versus small dense LDL. They can't just blanket statement LDL and say, oh, it's all bad. Okay, because what we know now is that large buoyant LDL, it's fine. We could have that elevated and that's not a problem. Okay, if it was the small dense LDL, then that's the one that says, all right, we've got some cardiovascular risk here that is potentially happening. So I kept looking to see if they would address the type of LDL, and they never, ever did. Okay, secondary outcome measures were changes in cardiometabolic factors like plasma lipids, glucose and insulin levels, and serum trimethylamine and oxide level, plasma vitamin B12 level, and body weight. Exploratory measures were adherence to study diets, ease or difficulty in following the diets, particular participant energy levels, and sense of well-being. So they were also looking at those. Anything else that I found to their dietary intervention? So they had it in two parts. So the study consisted of 2 4-week phases: delivered meals and self-provided meals. Participants were provided all no-cost meals for the first 4 study weeks by a nationwide meal delivery company. It was expected that after 4 weeks of food delivery and health educator counseling, that participants would understand the amounts and types of foods they should purchase and prepare to achieve maximum adherence to the diets when self-providing meals. Research staff worked with Trifecta Nutrition to develop menu offerings to match a healthy vegan and omnivorous diet, which emphasized vegetables, fruits, and whole grains while limiting added sugars and refined grains. During the initial 4 weeks, meals were delivered once each week with 7 days of breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Participants also purchased and consumed snacks to meet their energy requirements, following guidance from health educators. Were the meals that they were given the same amount of calories? And they were instructed to add snacks so that they can meet the difference of their actual caloric needs by buying snacks themselves. It just says they were instructed. But did they actually really need snacks and actually bought them? So that's the question. What about if some of the participants did not purchase any additional snacks to meet their needs, which could have resulted, if they didn't want any more food, what about if they didn't and they lost weight? Okay, so that's my question when it comes to this. So guiding principles were reinforced: choose minimally processed foods, build a balanced plate with vegetable starch, protein, and healthy fats. 3, choose a variety within each food group. And 4, individualize these guidelines to meet preferences and needs. Okay, that's good. That's great that they gave them such wonderful education. And that's one of the benefits of being in this study, is that the participants increased their knowledge. Although weight loss was not discouraged, our diet design did not include a prescribed energy restriction and was not intended to be a weight loss study. Okay, very good. Participants were told to eat until they were satisfied throughout the study. That's a good thing. But that can also be very subjective too, because some people can get full easily when they consume more fiber. When fiber is consumed in our body, it will absorb water and it expands in our GI tract, making us feel full sooner than what we would like to. And then sometimes people will just not eat as much. This is good that they have all this information, they were guided, but then it also leaves a lot of room for not being able to catch how much they actually really consumed. That might make a difference. And some people from other camps will say it doesn't matter, the calories in and out, it's about the quality. And so there's that too, which we can look at from both angles. Okay. So yeah, it's good to look at this objectively. Okay. And the collection of dietary data. So 2 types of dietary data were collected. For the primary reporting data, they had 3 unannounced 24 dietary recalls, a structured interview intended to capture detailed information about food and drink intakes. So they were administered within a 1-week window, 2 weekdays and 1 weekend of each time. That's good they caught 1 weekend, because sometimes we eat differently on the weekend. And each time, okay, so baseline. So they did baseline for weekend, week 8. Data were collected via telephone by a registered dietitian. For the secondary reporting data, participants were encouraged to log their food intake using the Chronometer app. And so these data were used by health educators for real-time guidance and participants. Okay, so here's the thing. They did not say if the data, looks like my microphone keeps falling down. Let me just tighten it here. Okay, so here's the thing. With Chronometer, you could either use the picture feature where you take pictures and then it will give you the data, or you can enter the information manually. So they didn't say if one was used versus the other. It would be nice to know, because in research, it is very important to be consistent with how data is collected. Oh, and this is very interesting. Like in their abstract their abstract, they actually didn't mention that they also collected stool samples, and they didn't really provide any information on that. And it would be nice to know what type of stool test they used. Did they use relative abundance, or did they use quantitative PCR or whole genome? There are all these different tests now that can show different things at different accuracy levels. Interesting, they did not elaborate on that. Okay, so let's look at their results. We've got the results right here. So this is very interesting to me. You always have to comb through this with a fine comb. Okay, so after the 8 weeks, when it came to the first piece of information, what they're happy, they were showing that these markers can show an improvement, decreasing cardiovascular risk. Okay, and so they were happy with their LDL level and weight, and there's one more, and fasting insulin. Again, they don't say which LDL it is, but they did find here after 8 weeks that there was a statistically significant result when it came to LDL. So decreases in LDL, okay? But again, is it large buoyant or is it small dense? And then fasting insulin, they found statistical significance that LDL is lower in the vegan, and then the fasting insulin is statistically significantly lower in those who ate the vegan meal pattern, and that their body weight, the vegan group, lost some weight. But here's the thing. It's not by a whole lot as far as when you look at the LDL, the vegan group had 95.5. That was average. And then the LDL for the omnivorous group had 116. But the thing is, if this is large buoyant, it's fine. It's fine. So this doesn't really tell us much. And with the insulin levels, there was a difference of, for the insulin levels, 2.9. So it was 2.9 less, okay, when it came to the difference, a difference in the fasting insulin levels. But here's the thing, 2.9, you could go down lower 2.9 and still be within normal limits. And is it really fasting insulin that tells us everything? We really need to look at HOMA-IR. That is the test that is even better in telling us about insulin resistance versus just the fasting insulin alone. Okay, and then the body weight, they saw that there was a difference of 1.9 kilograms, okay, and it's, okay, that's not a whole lot, in my opinion, okay? And again, were the people who were on the vegan group, did they follow through with making sure that they ate the snacks that they needed to meet their caloric needs? Because that meal pattern alone is so high in fiber that it can make them feel full sooner, that they might not feel like they need to eat more. So that's something that I would question, okay? And let's see what other things. Okay, so this is what I was saying earlier that I needed to look at more closely with a fine tooth comb, is that when I looked specifically at their other secondary markers, I looked at HDL. They did not mention at all that the omnivorous group had an increase in their HDL, while the vegan group had 56.3, the omnivorous group had 63.7, which, wow, that's fantastic. That's the kind of cholesterol level that we like to see, because what's really important to know also, what is looked at in the literature now, more so than total cholesterol or even LDL, is our triglyceride to HDL ratio. How come they didn't look at that for this? And they could have done that, but triglyceride and HDL, they had that, okay? They had triglycerides and they have HDL. So they could have taken the triglyceride number and divided by HDL. And if it's less than 2, then that means, the LDL is actually okay. The LDL is more of the large buoyant LDL versus the small dense LDL. All right. So basically what we really need to look at in order to say, okay, cardiovascular risk, is it truly decreasing the risk? We shouldn't rely on LDL. We should be looking at the different types of LDL, and we need to see, is there triglycerides? Is there the HDL ratio? Because that will be very important to look at. So we can look at the triglyceride to HDL ratio and look at it for every single person. Okay, when that is less than 2, that is telling us, okay, so the LDL is, if it's less than 2, then it is actually the large buoyant LDL. So that means potentially their risk for cardiovascular is lower than others, okay? All right. So that's what I'm thinking as I'm looking through all this, that it was quite a stretch to say that cardiovascular risk has decreased for those who are on the vegan diet, because it was only for 8 weeks. And let's see what else. They were only looking at LDL and not differentiating it. And they should have looked at HOMA-IR. That's very important. They should have also looked at nutrigenetics. Okay, our gene variations that are nutrition related, it's very important. And it's also very important to look at minerals in the cells, not just in our blood. So this is my objective review, that if some things could have been fine-tuned, then we could have a better picture. And some things just needed to be clarified. They needed to add things about minerals, because minerals can also play an important part in our cardiovascular health. That is something to consider, that we need to be able to keep in mind. Is this something that truly has all of the minerals in its high bioavailable forms? Okay, so let us end with their limitations that they actually stated for themselves. This study also has some limitations. First, the adult twin population was generally healthy and may not be generalizable to other populations. Second, we studied a small sample size. So that's good that they stated that. However, the use of monozygotic twins may reduce issues of reproducibility because the twins acted as their own controls. Third, study duration was short. Very good that they acknowledged that. However, in this study, as well as several previous trials, clinically relevant changes in cardiovascular risk factors were observed as early as 4 weeks into the intervention. But again, what are you looking at, okay, with LDL? And fourth, there was no follow-up period, which limited insights of post-study stability and sustainability of diet behaviors. And that's very nice that they acknowledge that. That's very good. Fifth, Our study was not designed to be isocaloric, thus changes to LDL cannot be separated from weight loss observed in the study. And last but not least, we do have here that the funding and support was by the Vote Foundation. And this group of people are supporters of protecting animals, animal rights. So it's just something to keep in mind. There are some things that it would have been good to clarify and to look into. And just keep in mind that when it comes to cardiovascular health, it's really not these particular labs that we should just rely on. It would be nice to also look at homocysteine, triglyceride to HDL ratio, HOMA-IR, and inflammatory markers. So I'm not telling you what to believe. That is completely up to you. The ball is in your court. Okay, friend. If you would like to work on your cardiovascular health and improve it by way of optimizing your gut and hormone health, please reach out to me. I will be more than happy to help you. Now, in all that we do, in all that we eat and drink, may we do it all for the glory of God.